Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I have to say that I am deathly afraid of the ocean, but I love to swim. So it's kind of weird, but I found somebody that's going to be able to help me with both of those today. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So Tim Dittloff, how are you today?
Great, Dave. Good to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
And no worries. So you own a company called Full Sail Leadership Academy. So tell me, what is that exactly?
Yeah, what we do is we help organizations create more productive, more enthusiastic teams by teaching them the 5 essentials of a team:
Okay.
strength first leadership, steward leadership, and the power of shared leadership language. And we do that on land, in classrooms, and then we take people out on Lake Michigan or other bodies of water, the Keys, the Caribbean, San Diego waters, so that we reinforce the concepts that they learn in the classrooms and have lifelong shared experiences and learning.
Okay, so you got me on three of the four. Okay, I've lived on Lake Michigan my whole life, so I can pass on that. Caribbean, Keys, and Coronado or San Diego, wherever
San
down there.
Diego,
Oh
right.
my gosh, I'm in on three of those. So when you ever need rail meat, you call me, okay? Because
All
I'm
right.
more than happy to just purely be on the side to make sure that that thing doesn't tip over. So.
Okay. All
So
right.
that's what I think is cool, and I appreciate you being on today, Tim, because I want to kind of unpack this because I thought when we first met, I thought it was really interesting that, I do leadership training. Tons of
Mhm.
people do leadership training. I think what's missing in that leadership training is that actual, life experience piece from the sailing. So kind of walk me through, if you would, walk the listeners through like a quick day. Is it half a day in the boardroom and then half a day on the boat, or how does that work for you
Yeah,
guys?
it really depends upon what the clients want.
Okay.
We do a full day session or we do a half day session as well. But yeah, we really deep dive into how those things I talked about before, that 5 essentials of a team, the shared leadership language, steward leadership, and strengths first leadership fit into the mission, vision, the values, and the voice and validation of the people on the team.
Okay.
So if somebody wanted to do a full day, we'd spend more time probably doing a deep dive on their vision and mission and values. We've done the experiences, for example, where someone's really recrafting their vision statement and they use our classroom experience as part of that. So we add in a little bit more time for that.
Okay.
We always
So
get people out on the water, to experience what they learned in the classrooms.
yeah, so I want to, because we've probably a lot of people listening, a lot of the entrepreneurs and business owners that listen to the show have probably been through some kind of leadership training before.
Mhm.
But again, what happens do you call it, first of all, do you call it a boat? What's the right word? Ship, boat?
Yeah, well, we would call them boats.
Okay, good. So
Yeah.
when you get on that boat, and let's just say because it's cold here today, and I want to think like Caribbean. So we're down in the Caribbean,
Right.
and we've done some leadership training, and now we're going to jump on the boat. What are some things that we're learning in sitting on that boat? Are we actually doing a lot of the nautical things as well, and then you're tying those into the actual leadership piece?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. We're getting people to actually take the helm, which take the helm of leadership. Right.
Okay.
The helm of leadership. So actually driving the boat,
Okay.
taking the boat through the tack or jibe, whatever the case may be, and actually working through that language and understanding how something as little as where you're sitting on the boat, whether it's a high wind day or a low wind day, has an impact on how that boat moves through the water and the speed that it moves through the water. And we've had some really cool takeaways where people have said, "Wow, my takeaway from this is that even a little bit of input, even though it may seem meaningless to me in the office, can have a huge impact based on what I learned from sailing.
Okay. So I got to think, I mean, as soon as you said drive the boat, okay, people were like, everybody's ears perked up, because for whatever reason, whether it's, the boat, the motorcycle, whatever it is, people want to drive. Most people prefer to drive, and especially entrepreneurs, they want to drive, and they're like, Tim, how do I drive this thing? I mean, but then again, it's interesting because you actually do determine the direction of the boat. You determine the success of that journey based on that person that's actually driving it. So that's a really solid connection that people must make, because it's one thing to drive your business where you think it's the same every day. It's completely different driving the boat, realizing that somebody could fall off. How do you then, talk about leadership in, all of a sudden we're looking at your whole, your tribe, your whole team, your whole company, what does that look like on the water? Because now you're looking out for everybody on the ship, correct?
Yeah, right.
The boat, excuse me.
Which is a huge teaching moment right there, right? That everyone on board has to be responsible for being a lookout for the welfare of crew and the boat. Okay, it's rule number 5 in the Coast Guard rule book that everybody has to be a lookout.
Okay.
That vessel shall have a lookout in all directions at all times and all manners, right? And so that's what we're talking about, reinforcing with the team, is that, hey, everybody has to be responsible for looking out for the welfare of the organization and for each other.
Wow.
Where we're taking the helm really kind of is very analogous, even for maybe not the entrepreneur, him or herself,
Mm-hmm.
even for someone on the team. We had an organization out 2 years ago where they had some challenges with team members not wanting to engage,
Okay.
not feeling confident in their ability to provide input because they didn't feel credentialed enough to do so.
Okay.
And so when we talked about that in the classroom, they were starting to get it. And then we got out on the water, we took those people that were junior people in essence and said, okay, hey, the sails are set, everything's ready, take the helm, drive the boat.
Sure.
And they did exactly what they did in the company, in the organization on land. The first reaction was, oh man, I don't know how to do this. I can't do this.
Yeah.
I'm not credentialed enough to do this.
Sure.
It's like, no, you can learn this. I'm right here as the captain. I've got a first mate, 3 feet from you.
Yep.
That's going to help you. Together we can do this. And it's such a huge confidence builder.
Sure.
It really becomes a great teaching moment.
And what is the goal then in that situation? Is confidence, you must identify some weaknesses, some areas of opportunity for growth in the classroom, and then you kind of show them out on the water what that's going to look like in your business. Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah, right. And we go into a session after sitting down with the entrepreneur, business owner, business unit leader. We know what their issues are. So whether it's gosh, we aren't connecting, we don't get each other's roles, or we're not getting input from these 3 people. We know that so that we can key the land-based session to address those things and set up then the sailing time to really kind of key that in.
Okay. Wow. And I really like what you said. I mean, I wrote that down. Everyone has to be a lookout. So if somebody's not looking out for, in this case, what other ships, buoys, rocks, logs, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that could potentially, cause damage to the boat. That's what people are looking out for. How do you then kind of bring that back to the company? Because let's be real, 2 out of 3 people, Tim, every day show up and they're not even engaged in their own
Right.
job, right?
Yeah. Right.
So, it's a minority for the people that are engaged. And then by engaged, I'm thinking that's kind of one of the components of engagement is being a lookout.
Yeah. Right.
Now, I have to say, I've been on a sailboat before, and I was rail meat for people that purely wanted weight on the boat to, make it go faster or move it around. And there wasn't the captain at the time never once said, be on the lookout for anything, So I understand that. I understand now what you're saying, but what do we do with, or what do you do with people in their businesses that aren't really looking out for this on a day-to-day basis? How do you
Yeah.
teach somebody to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. What we do is we show them the importance of just stopping and asking some simple questions
Okay.
about what's going on. So a little story about that. On the boat that I race on right now, our bowman, a couple years ago, his wife was going through some terminal brain cancer and breast
Mm,
cancer issues, and and sailing became our bowman's respite.
okay.
He retired early. He became her caregiver 24/7,
Yeah,
with the exception of racing. Racing was his respite.
sure.
And when he was racing, he was spot on as far as being engaged.
Mm,
And he would watch for traffic amazingly. And he would watch the set of the jib as the bowman and could kind of coach things through on the trim of the sail. When his wife passed, he was completely different. He was disengaged.
mm,
Sailing was no longer his respite.
wow.
And we'd always have to ask how traffic looked. How does the trim of the jib look, right?
Sure.
We have to bring him in.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get disengaged because they don't feel that people could care or connect with them. So the simple things of, hey, know that your spouse is going through some health issues, or we know your
Mhm.
kid's going through some stuff.
Yeah.
How you doing with that?
Yeah.
And just stopping for 2 minutes
Sure.
to
Wow.
connect on a personal level
Yeah.
makes a huge difference.
Sure. Well, and that's so interesting that you bring that up, because I think of all the people that just go through life day after day. It's just a routine. There's really not a lot of engagement. There's not a lot of involvement. You don't really, you don't get much past the surface level of, hey, how's it going? It's crazy when you think about it, Tim, how's it going? And people are like, fine. Or I like, my favorite is they go, not too bad. And I think to myself, so it's going bad, but it's not too bad, right? I mean, we just had these canned, comments, and I wish that we as leaders took a more active interest in, our team. And in this case, your crew really they're kind of looking to you as the captain. They need your feedback. They need your advice. They need that that constant, sometimes constant reassurance, right?
Yeah,
So how do you
it's
talk about that on the
yeah,
on the
it's a
on the
it's a
on the
yeah,
sail?
it's a two-way street. I mean, in a race, everyone counts on each other. Even the skipper, who's the boat owner at the helm, is looking for the crew to give positive feedback and even positive conflict on where we should be tacking and where we should be taking risks and where we should be mitigating those risks.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the skipper at the helm doesn't see what other people on the boat necessarily see from their perspective. So it has to happen. It really does. So a lot of this, for me, really comes down to, as a business leader or a captain of a boat, right?
Yeah.
It comes down to really steward leadership. And um, I'm a super huge fan of Bob Chapman and Everybody Matters, his book. And we talk about that a lot in the organization. We try to encourage people to really adopt that mindset. So Chapman and Simon Sinek talks about this story as well. Um, Chapman had to make some serious cuts back in the early 2000s, and it was really making him have some internal, basically, struggles of how he can do this as a person, as
Sure.
a human being, and cutting the legs out of people that are on his staff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the story goes that he was at a wedding and he was watching the couple get married, and the pastor asked the question, who gives this woman to this man? And the bride's mom and dad stood up, and the dad answered, her mother and I. And it was at that time that Chapman realized that the people that worked for him, his human resources, were more than resources, that they were human beings, and that
Yeah.
that they were somebody else's son or daughter, mom or dad, um, brother or sister. And how he treats the people that are his human resources, the human beings that work with him, are how they're going to impact the lives of people in their lives, how they'll treat their husband or wife
Sure.
or mom or dad.
Yeah.
And he had this realization that we can make society better by treating people better in our organizations. And I truly believe that's
Sure.
possible.
Yeah, for sure.
It's what drives me a lot. Um, um, yeah, and it's something they talk about in the U.S. Olympic teams. I had a chance to meet with Willie McBride, who's um, a sailing coach for the U.S. Olympic team, and he talked about how better people make better sailors.
Mm-hmm.
and, and I think that in an organization, better sailors make better team members in organizations. So that
Sure.
as we teach people, what does it mean to have trust and respect for people on the boat? What does it mean to clearly communicate well, to be able to have positive conflict? That we're going to have stronger teams in industry and more caring teams in society.
Yeah, and you bring up positive conflict, and I love that term, Tim, because when I do conflict resolution training, and I'm in a group and we're talking about conflict, and I say, throw out some words, when you think of conflict, throw out some words that, you know, are other words that come to your mind. And I gotta say that 99 times out of 100, the words that come out are negative words. Conflict is deemed to be a negative thing, and I'm like, there's healthy conflict and there's unhealthy conflict. To your point, there's positive conflict. I mean, if it's my responsibility to say what direction we're going and we're heading right for danger, it's my responsibility to be in conflict with the captain at that point, because captain's going in one direction and he says, tell me if I need to change. So it's got to be tough when the captain's like, hey, you don't know what you're talking about, I'm going to continue to go that way. Do you end up with a lot of that at kind of power plays at the beginning until people kind of understand a little bit more about what goes on that boat?
Yeah. I can give you an example from the racing world, but to more your question about um, uh, folks that come out with us.
Yeah.
So we talk about shared language because it's important on the boat, and it's important in business. We had one international company. They have their main corporate office in Milwaukee, but they have offices throughout the world. We had 8 of their HR leaders come in for a meeting, and we took them through our processes, and their takeaway is holy smokes, we need to change our onboarding process based on what we learned about the importance of shared language.
Sure.
Well, 2 years ago, we had a fitness firm come in. They have multiple branches throughout the city. We had their leadership team in, and we were talking about the need for shared language. And one of the general managers, you could just see him kind of check out. It was kind of like that teacher's voice in the Peanuts character.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? You could just see him.
You do that very well, by
right?
the way, Tim. Good job.
Thank you. Watched a lot of TV when I was a kid. Anyhow, you could just see that in his eyes that, okay, I've had enough of this shared language.
Yeah.
And the rest of the people were really enjoying that conversation. So I asked him to take the helm and take us through a TAC.
Okay.
And we rehearsed the shared language with him. But when it came to executing based on that shared language, he couldn't do it.
Sure.
And so we asked him the question, what's keeping you from steering the boat correctly? Because he would just steer us in circles over and over. Try it once. Okay, let's get out of this one. Let's sail a little bit. All right, try it again. And he'd sail us in circles. So we just asked him, all right, Sam, we'll call him Sam. His name wasn't really Sam.
Sure.
Sam, what's up? I guess I don't understand how to make the shared language come to life.
Sure.
And so that was a prime example of check your ego.
Yep.
And learn well.
Wow.
But the difference between positive conflict and negative conflict on a boat is huge. I used to race with a team, and we'll just call it Boat M for now. And when you got on that crew, it was like, all right, welcome to our boat. There's your job. Don't screw up. And if there was an error that took place, whether it was trimming a jib fast enough or whatever, easing out a sail, you heard about it. And it caused a lot of consternation. And it really all started at the top.
Yeah.
It started off with the skipper who would yell at the first mate who is a relative, and that caused real headbutting there, and all the negative energy then spilled down to the crew.
Sure. Wow.
And the skipper and first mate really didn't care about how you wanted to grow or develop as a sailor. It was just, here's your job, don't screw up.
Yeah.
That team has by far the worst turnover and record out of the racing fleet. And compare and contrast that with a team that I race with now, that there can be a ton of yelling, but the goal is the same. The goal is mission.
Yeah.
The goal is helping each other out to the fullest. And that boat wins fairly consistently.
And that's where I think like you just said, in my mind, turmoil equals turnover. I mean, it's hard in the companies that I work with and do research on. It's hard to see anybody not having, turmoil is okay, but like you said, there's got to be a reason for it. Some people just want turmoil just, to create turmoil just because that's what they need to, exist. And that's obviously not healthy. On a boat, I gotta believe that there's ranks and there's different people doing different things, I mean, somehow we have to make sure that we keep those ranks, because at the end of the day, whoever, and let me ask it this way. If the captain's not steering, is the captain's still in control? If he gives me the helm, he's still in control. Right? He's still the final decision maker, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah. So I mean, and again, I think about when you say steward-based leadership, is that the same as servant-based leadership for you?
It has components of servant-based leadership.
Okay.
I think servant leadership is more focused on the organization, and I think steward leadership is really more focused on care and keeping of the individuals.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Being a caretaker of those in the organization is steward leadership.
Okay. Because when I wrote Growing on Purpose, part of the book talks about strengthening the team. And so, that to me, I invested a lot of my research on that, still spend a ton of time on finding ways to strengthen the team. And each team's different. So there's not like you can always say there's a pat way to do this. I can say that the vast majority of teams, without that thinking of the other person, if that's not prevalent in that team, whether it's the owner thinking of the team thinking of each other, or quite frankly, the team thinking of the owner, if you don't have that, circle, so to speak, success is so highly unlikely. And,
Right.
do you see that on a ship too, or on a boat, that a lot of that happens?
I mean, in those boats where there's an element of true human care, stewardship, if you will,
Okay.
of the crew,
Mm-hmm.
you see crew members in turn becoming a steward of the boat.
Okay.
And a steward of each other's lives. And where there's that steward attitude among the crew, man, you'll see them pitch in to stain varnish or clean the deck or do maintenance projects. They'll treat that boat like it was their own.
Right.
If you get that dictatorial person, good luck trying to get people to get involved in the life of the mundane of the operations, right?
Yeah. And I think that the worst three words that I hear is "not my job," right? When you have somebody saying that's not my job, the reality is, like what you just said, it's entirely possible that it is that person's, disengagement. But I also think, like you said, and I think this is uncovering some cool stuff. It is possible for that to be the leader's fault as well. Because if we set it up, if we don't care about them, why would we possibly expect them to care about us? And the odd part is, or not the odd part, but the expensive part for a company is when the team doesn't care about each other, or the team doesn't care about its leadership. It permeates out into, now the team doesn't care about the customer. And that was the second part of Growing on Purpose for me, was that when we're here not only to strengthen the team, but we're also here to improve your customer's experience. And you can't improve a customer's experience when you have a disengaged team. So I think it's really detrimental if you have anybody on your team and you're listening and they're saying it's not my job, or they're acting like it's not my job. We need to look at both sides. It doesn't always mean it's the employee or the team member's fault. We might permeate that, that concept by our leadership style. So do you tend to get people walking on to your ship, boat? Sorry, I always call it a ship because we sail a lot, cruise a lot. So that's where I get the ship from. So I apologize. People walk on your your boat, do they walk on one way and tend to walk off a little bit more self-aware? Does that tend to happen
Yeah,
for you?
yeah, I would say so. And quite honestly, I mean that's the beauty of what we do, right? Because we have that experiential component. Um, it's pretty hard to disengage on a boat.
Yeah.
It's real easy to get called into a meeting at a conference center, um, and or a country club, and basically act like you're looking at emails and just totally disengaged. There's no
Sure.
real mutual corner of disengagement on a sailboat. You know, you know? There's a
Yeah.
lot of moving parts, so you got to stay in the game.
Yeah.
You got to be in the game. Um, and to your point, that's again another beauty of the sailing analogy, right? We always talk about how good it is when we can cross train and know each other's job and what's going on and communicate about that, because who knows when you're going to have to step into a role. Um, I'm not doing the bowman's job on a race boat. I work the cockpit a lot, but man, if something happens to that bowman and he breaks an arm or is ill all of a sudden, and a head sail has to come down because we're going to switch out the sail, I better know how to do that and be able to
Sure.
jump in
Sure.
to help out. So yeah, that it's not my job really can't exist on a sailboat.
So if you have that on the sailboat, do you end up, I mean, on your race team, if you have that mentality, does that, I'm assuming there's a day of reckoning for that individual where they're either going to leave the boat, or B, they're going to realize that it is their job. I mean, that's when you're in life and death situations like this, or you're in win-lose situations like that, you don't really have the affordability to be able to compensate very long for somebody's lack of engagement. Is that correct?
Yeah, right. And that's why, quite honestly, that's why so much of our success or failure comes down to a success after the race, or even after we go out with a corporate customer. We always do a debrief session, and we say that, hey, this is something we do either after a night of racing, or um, we as a crew do after we take a customer out. We as a crew gather to talk about what did we do right, what will we never do again, and what can we do slightly better.
Sure.
Um, the military does it. I know the crew of commercial vessels do it on a daily basis. Hey, what are we doing right? What won't we ever do again, if possible? And how can we improve the things that we're doing fairly well?
Wow. Yeah, that's so applicable to your business. So that's why I really appreciate your time excuse me, today, Tim, is because I see such a connection between, it's one thing to learn a leadership concept in a book, in a conference center, like you said, somewhere. It's completely different when you're out there and now you're finding ways to really make this applicable. And you have this strong gut punch question on your website, which I really liked. It says, will your team survive the next storm? It's like right there in front of you. And, on one hand, everyone's like, well, we'll be fine, right? You probably get a lot of we'll be fine type stuff. We'll figure out a way. But, in today's complicated marketplace, just leaving it up to game day decisions is not necessarily successful anymore. So you're kind of planning ahead in these trainings for when there is a storm, because we know there's going to be a storm on the ocean somewhere. It's pretty likely that there's going to be a storm in your business in the next days, weeks, or months. So there's a pretty strong correlation there. How do you kind of work through that, the storm piece? How do you help people understand to prepare now? Because hey, if water's fine, I'm not having any problems right now in my company. How do you help them along that, in that preparation?
Yeah, we always talk about, well, you ended up with the word. We always talk about, you need to prepare, you need to plan, you need to drill, and you need to rehearse. Okay. And that results then in survival, resilience, and readiness for the future. Live example from a race this summer. We did the hook race, and everything was just beautiful on Saturday morning when the race started.
And what's the
Um,
hook race, Tim?
the hook race starts in Racine
Okay.
and it sails up to Door County. So you go through Death's Door and
Okay.
then you pass Chambers Island and you end up in Menominee, Michigan. So it's 189 nautical miles,
Okay.
nonstop racing. So it was a wonderfully pleasant day on Saturday morning when the race started at 9 o'clock. Into the afternoon, we started seeing 43 knots of wind.
Oof.
Um, and so the winds were clipping along. When I went off of watch at midnight, so we take shifts and, um, get some rest at some point during that. I went off of watch at midnight, was going to go back on at 3 o'clock. When I went off of watch, the National Weather Service was calling for 70-mile-an-hour winds,
Wow.
torrential rains, thunder and lightning, and just for fun, some potential hail thrown in.
Just for
Um,
fun.
yeah, and knowing that, because we, prepare, we plan, we drill, we rehearse, we knew how to shrink our sail size. We knew what to prepare for. We knew that we should be connected to jack lines and tethered into the boat. And that resulted in us making it through the night. Now, did we see those 70-mile-an-hour winds? No, we saw not winds that were around 60 knots, so close to it. But torrential rains, but that really did prepare us. That preparation, planning, drilling, rehearsing helped us survive.
Wow. So is a knot in a mile and is the same as a mile per hour? So 10
Yeah.
knots and 10 miles an hour, are those the same?
No, it's 8/10 basically.
Okay.
A knot is 8/10 of a mile basically.
Gotcha.
Mm.
Whoever thought of that, Tim? I mean, why can't you just have miles per hour? I mean,
Goes back to the old sailing days and shipping days of days gone by before electronics. But you know what, it adds to the culture, right?
yeah.
It adds to the culture where, understanding that language
Yep.
and connecting through that language
Yep.
creates the culture.
Yeah.
And if you're not communicating with the right language,
Yep.
you're struggling.
Yeah. And we've actually, on a personal note, we spend time up on Washington Island up in Door County. And, we take the ferry across and spend a
Yep.
few days up on the island. And it's just crazy because, when you look at it, you'd think that it's like, how hard can this be, right? You take a boat from one spot to the other and then back. And then you kind of all of a sudden turn the corner of Plum Island, I think that is. And then you see these buoys and there's like this little spot where they can go in and do it the right way. I mean, think about that from your business for a second. It may look smooth sailing, but all of a sudden, as you get closer, you start to see that there are rocks or there's sandbars or whatever it is that could obstruct your, success. And that's actually the next book I'm working on, is about business blind spots, because that's a perfect thing that, what, you don't know what you don't know.
Great.
And that's why people, bring a guy like you in, because you're able to see things that they're not able to see. When I owned my business and had, we had 20 some people on our team and we were clipping along doing 10 million in annual sales. We had outside people at times come in because we didn't know what we didn't know. So I'm assuming that's one of the big things that you come alongside people and kind of help them with those pieces. Do they seem to be open at first or kind of closed at first and then open up as they start to understand your value? Is that what you tend to find?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, I mean, and I think part of it comes down to, letting down the guards and saying there are other ways to look at things. Um, yeah, there's a slide that I show. I Google Vestas Wind, um,
VESTAS.
VESTAS, Vestas Wind,
Okay.
and then um, put the word wreck after that.
Okay.
Vestas Wind wreck. So the Vestas Wind is a Volvo Ocean racing yacht, and it's a multi-million-dollar boat, and had a professional crew, and that crew was sailing along at 19 knots in the Indian Ocean. They hit a shoal,
Hmm.
and they ripped about a 15-foot hole in the side of that boat.
Ouch.
That's a pretty expensive mistake.
Yeah.
Why did it happen?
Yep.
It happened because the crew, a seasoned crew, didn't set their GPS beyond the surface chart that it was programmed for. So had they dialed in their GPS, they would have seen the shoal.
Sure.
Had they gone back to something even more basic, I teach coastal navigation for American Sailing Association as a hobby, I guess, part of my just sailing education.
Mm-hmm.
We always teach sailors chart on paper first, and then turn your chart plotter on. Get to know the route on paper first,
Sure.
and then rely on the GPS, because systems can fail. I've been on boats where the GPS has failed, and thank God we knew where we were going on the chart,
Yeah.
on the paper chart first, right? And I think so many businesses just to sometimes need to hit the pause button, so to speak, and get back to basics. And
Yeah.
that's another thing we allow them to do, is kind of relook at things. We had an accounting firm out last summer, or this summer, I should say, that really was starting to wrestle with their vision and mission. And so, hey, let's take this time to kind of, talk about how we're communicating with our customers, and really go back to ask ourselves, what's the vision here? So yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. And so I think about what you're talking about the GPS. And usually when I come into a business, and it's probably the same way with you, is we're not talking about huge course corrections. They're normally little, 1 or 2 or 3 degree course corrections. And I always tell the story, my parents live in San Diego, and so if you leave Mitchell Field and you want to end up in San Diego, but let's say you're the pilot's up there and he's like, you know what, I'm just going to move this dial 1 or 2 or 3 degrees. You end up in LAX, which is a painful 2.5 hour drive from LAX down to San Diego.
Sure.
All
Mm-hmm.
because of this little 1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree, whatever it is, course correction back, earlier in the day. And that's where I think is really important for people listening, is that, we are looking at little course corrections. It's going to make the difference, to your point, between hitting something and not. So what are some of the ways that we can what are some things you teach that we could course correct our business on?
Yeah. So obviously, Covey, I always had that 7 habits, right? And he always talked about beginning with the end in mind.
Yep.
So what is the end game? Where do we want to end up? I was being cognizant of that. But I go back to, we talked about the military analogies, right? In this real volatile, uncertain, changing world that we live in,
Right.
the the military has really developed this process called the OODA loop, OODA,
Hmm.
observe, or observe, orient, then decide, and then act.
Okay.
So observe what's going on, kind of then orient to what needs to happen, decide on your course correction, and then act on it, right? And we teach that a lot when we're out on the water section, right?
Sure.
We'll talk about, all right, our wind just shifted. We were tacking towards that green buoy over there, but the wind shifted. Now we're going to have to, that's the observation, right?
Yep.
Okay, now what's the orientation that we have? Okay, well, we have to now come at it a little bit different way. We have to maybe throw in another tack or two. What's the decision going to be, and then act on it.
Yeah.
And I think that can
Wow.
really help us out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that brings us all the way back as we start to come in for a landing on this today. That goes all the way back to everyone has to be a lookout, because now, you are beginning with the end in mind. And so if no one's paying attention to where we're going, I mean, for me, I think about, sitting on a sailboat, and I think about, looking around, enjoying the scenery, enjoying the sun, thinking about so many things that are going on in my life and not really even worried about where I'm going. And if the captain has that mentality of, oh, wow, whatever, if we get there, we get there, I mean, that's why I call my book Growing on Purpose, because I run into so many people that grow by mistake. They don't have a plan. They don't really have any idea. They're just kind of, some people throw stuff on the wall to see what sticks. There's
Yeah.
so many different ways to grow, but there's very few ways to grow on purpose. So I really appreciate the observe, orient, decide, and then act on that. So thank you. Thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. That's awesome. So couple of questions, and I'm gonna let you go. What's one thing that you feel comfortable sharing with people that they probably don't know about you?
Um, licensed captain, and really just have a huge passion about sailing, making things better through sailing. Um, I always tell people, when sure thing you don't know about me. So I'm a little past my 40th birthday, but for my 40th birthday, I wanted to find out if I was still physically fit. So I decided to sign up for a triathlon.
Nice.
It was a short sprint triathlon,
Yep.
but I did finish right behind a 28-year-old female. So I thought that was pretty good. I would have finished ahead of her had I tripped her 3 more times. So I would have taken her, but
That's awesome.
I didn't trip her 3 extra times.
That's funny.
Um,
Which one did you do, Tim?
it was the one out by Lake Kesus,
Okay.
for a charity out there.
Oh, nice. Because I've done them in Racine. I've done a bunch of them over my time, and yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. And I didn't start till I was older, so yeah, that's fun just to finish, right? But then
Mm.
it's so humbling to see somebody drive past you on a bike, and they're on a mountain bike, or they're just screwing around, or they're swimming past. I mean, oh my gosh, there's so many stories. But thanks for sharing that.
Mm.
If people want to get a hold of you, if they want to learn more about Full Sail Leadership Academy, Tim, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, just send me an email at tim@fullsailleadership.com.
Okay.
You can find us on the web at fullsailleadership.com, and probably two of the best ways of reaching out.
Awesome. That's so cool. Well, hey, thank you so much for unpacking this. I'm excited, hopefully in 2021, to be able to get out on your boat. And
Look forward to it.
especially like they can't, well, maybe they can, but I can't imagine COVID is much of an issue. Did it really affect you guys this year?
It really did. Yeah, we had a number of clients that really wanted to do something, but their corporate HR people said, we're not going to do that from a liability standpoint, even though
Gotcha.
we were fresh air and sunshine, even
Yeah,
though in the classroom we could socially distance to the max.
sure.
Now the plus side of it is we're taking those clients into next year. And so
Good.
we actually have a backlog of business, but
Excellent.
yeah, come join us in the Keys. We'll be down in the Keys March 10th through the 12th.
Oh my gosh, don't say that.
On General Patton's sailboat, no
Oh my
less.
gosh, that's fantastic. Yeah,
Very
if you ever need rail meat, I do that well. You tell me where to go and what to say, and you could tell me to stand with one foot here and rub my belly, and I'd be like, okay, I guess that's what I got to do. So, but thank you so much for unpacking this. I'm super excited to learn more about this and to get out on the water with you and experience it for myself. And hopefully next year we're going to be able to get ourselves somewhat back to normal. So again, I appreciate
Super.
your time.
Well, likewise. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. FullSailLeadership.com,
Yep.
right, is the best website for you. And I'm sure you're on LinkedIn and
Yep.
all that information will be in the show notes. So feel free to reach out to Tim. And Tim, thank you so much for spending some time with me, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right. Bye.